Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In this video I'm going to review Deform by Funeral Mist. Well, this is why I wait till the end of the year before I make my top lists. Funeral Mist is a Swedish black metal project and it's back with a fourth full-length album. Now this is a project that has been actually going for quite a while and it takes years when we go from one project to the next, but this right here is the shortest gap with just 3 years prior to the release of the previous album Hecatomb, which in my opinion was actually not just my favorite Funeral Mist album, but also one of my favorite black metal albums of the past decade. I actually ended up enjoying this album this much and it was a big grower, and even if I do enjoy the two first albums and I do think that they're pretty good works, it was Hecatomb that really clicked with me and was such an incredible experience and an exceptional album in the genre for me. I liked many of its elements that would just become better and better the more I would listen to it. I liked its furious and aggressive nature. I liked the structures with some of the songs which would go into some more proggy and avant-garde directions which were really well implemented in my opinion, and there were also some really nice melodic passages as well and some really imaginative riffs. So for me this was an album that was done really well and one of those black metal albums that really grabbed my attention. So this got me pretty excited to see the direction with this new album, even if I wasn't necessarily expecting to reach the same levels, mainly because I liked Hecatomb a lot as an album, but listening to Deiform I was actually really impressed by it, to the point where it's actually a close tie in which I prefer as an album. Because yeah, I think that Deiform is actually an incredible black metal album and one that was much better than expected. There are many great elements about this album, from the production, from the whole sound, the performances, the ideas. It's once again an album that really managed in a sense to blow me away, but I think that one of the greatest and most standout characteristics about this album in particular, it's just how relentless it is and just intense and aggressive from start to finish. Now, Funeral Mist are known for having albums that are just furious in their nature and just being relentless. This is something that is really characteristic about the sound of Funeral Mist, but I think that this one ends up going on a new level, especially when it comes to the drumming. Now I'm pretty sure that the drumming is just drum machine, which actually makes a bit sense because the drumming on this thing is just inhuman. The blast beats on this are just insane. They're extremely fast and they're just extremely aggressive, to the point where it's just absolutely relentless and would just go on and on. But even with that being the case, it just sounds awesome and it feels like there was a lot of focus in the drums in particular, like they're really clear into the mix and they're really well done. I mean, not only is the programming insanely good, but the sound is just so crisp and solid and everything just sounds so clear and detailed. So when it comes to the drumming, this album just goes next level. And yeah, apart from the drumming though, I think that this album manages to offer some nice ideas when it comes to some of the melodies and also having some pretty nice structures as well. The album starts really good with the track Twilight of the Flesh, which is definitely one of the highlights. You get one of the aspects that it's quite usual with the sound of Funeral Mist, as you have those choirs and those chants, and it just makes for a really epic experience. And I like that this track, even though starts with some quite simplistic melodies, it has some really interesting progressions to it and having those more sort of prog and avant-garde elements with the structure. It flows nicely, it's slow and heavy, and it just sounds epic. When it comes to the faster and more relentless part of the song, I love the blast beats with this one when it has all of those constant change-ups with the cymbals, which in my opinion gives a pretty nice touch And also when it comes to the riff, it's one of the coolest riffs out of this album, and it kinda reminded me of the first track out of Hecatomb, which was also one of my highlights and a track that really grew on me. And I think that this track in particular managed to just tie all of its elements and portions well together, making for undoubtedly one of the most memorable and one of the most solid moments out of this whole project. Now Apocalypticon, it's just non-stop sheer madness, an absolutely ruthless and brutal 4.5 minute track that gives you no room to breathe, and it's just filled with blast beats. I wouldn't say it contains some of the greatest ideas melodically, but it's definitely a heavy song that manages to stand out in its own way. In here was the one track that ended up being the least memorable for me. It is the one track that no matter how many times I would listen to it, it doesn't really contain the brightest ideas in the album in my opinion. It was the one track that I felt was just kinda okay. I liked many of its elements, but it wasn't the one track that really managed to stand out in my opinion. But then we still get back to the highlights with tracks like Children of the Earth. The highlight out of this track in particular is the children's choir attached with some really awesome melodies. The track by itself might be a bit lengthy and inconsistent, but it definitely contains some great elements and some of my favorites out of this whole album. We get back into the sheer insanity once again with one of the shorter moments of the album with the track Hooks of Hunger, which in my opinion just feels really chaotic, not really containing some of its brightest ideas, but I just like how ruthless and brutal it sounds for the most part. And then we get into a quite different direction for the rest of the album with a self-titled track, Deform, which after an album of non-stop insanity, this one in comparison is a much smoother moment. It doesn't really contain that much of an intensity to it, and it focuses more on the melodic aspects of Funeral Mist. And in my opinion, it just works amazingly, to the point where I would say that Deiform is definitely my favorite moment out of this album. It is an incredibly well done song, and even if it's the most unique and the most different moment out of the album, it is the one that manages in its own way to stand out the most, and actually so that Funeral Mist also managed to have some incredible ideas when it comes to some riffs and just making some extremely nice melodies. Nothing about it just feels like really original, but the main melody out of Deform just sounds awesome. It is majestic, it is beautiful, it is gorgeous, and it's just awesome. It sounds great and it's just beautiful. It's the most beautiful moment out of this whole project. It has a few moments where it gets intense and spices things up a bit, but the main idea behind it, it's just executed amazingly, and it makes for one of my favorite and the greatest moments I've heard in black metal, especially this year. And finally, the album ends with what is actually the most ruthless and the most insane moment, with the track Into the Ashes. This is the moment where I was just mind blown with the drums, and I was like, this is inhuman. This was just so well done. Now, I was obviously really impressed with the drumming of this entire thing, but Into Ashes just got into next level, and this is the one moment where I was just like, okay, there's something really crazy going over here with the drums. Like, the blast beats on this one just go non-stop. They just keep going and going and going, and it's just pure insanity. And the greatest part for me is where it has those rapid cymbals which just sound really awesome. The overall programming just sounds incredible. Another detail that I really liked about this track in particular is that it seems that when it comes to the main melody, there is a very nice focus on bass. And it's those fine little touches and details that make the song stand out in my opinion. There are some moments when it comes to some of the riffs where it might be too much of a chaos and become overbearing, but the main melody out of this is killer. And in general, what a heavy finisher. So basically what we have is just 7 tracks over here, and some of them actually ended up being really lengthy, with most of them going for about 9 minutes, which kinda worried me a little, but the songs generally just flow nicely, and the album in general was just impressive. I was hoping for a good result, but I ended up being more than just satisfied. This is such an incredible album, and Funeral Mist has actually ended up being one of the most intriguing and exciting black metal projects I have ever stumbled upon. The discography so far has been really consistent, and this is another great project. This is undoubtedly for me an easy contender for Black Metal Album of the Year, and being one of the very few projects that I'm really excited to see in which direction it's gonna go next. I really like this, and I'm super excited for even more. I'm gonna give Deiform an 8+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.